Welcome to the SumerSports Show. Lindsay, Rhodes, and Sam Bruchhaus with a special guest joining us today. We're going to talk offensive line with the one and only Duke Manyweather. I cannot wait to have a conversation with him, Sam, about all things offensive lineman, evaluation, development. We can really get into the weeds about that position group in the draft, even with him.
Yeah, I'm excited because on our SiriusXM show, which you can catch 7 p.m. on NFL radio on SiriusXM,
On Fridays.
on Fridays, we talked to Thomas deeply about evaluation. And Thomas is coming from the background of being a scout for 20, 30 years in the NFL. Now we get to see the flip side of that, the guys who are working with the players every day rather than,
Yeah.
evaluating the players. And it's such an interesting mystery the offensive line position is. And I feel like we're bringing a ton of great value to people who love football and love, the physical game.
Yeah. Give us a peek behind the curtain about what we can expect out of this year's class. Also, first though, some news that's happened since we last met, Sam. We have a quarterback signing in New York, and it is not Aaron Rodgers. And I think the Jameis Winston signing with the Giants eliminates Aaron Rodgers. And in that regard, I think it's a very interesting signing because it tells us a few things about their path forward.
Lindsay, I just got to say that I'm glad to have Jameis Winston back in a city that I'm in. When I was in New Orleans, he was in New Orleans. Now I'm in New York. He's in New York. He's fun. He's a media
Yeah.
guy. That being said, it doesn't seem like this is a starting quarterback contract that he received. It seemed like he's coming in to be an option, which lends the question. We've talked about it a lot, Lindsay. Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, there's smoke at 1, 2, and 3 about who will go. It seems that this is a setup for a quarterback to come in and either be given the job immediately or develop behind Jameis, and Jameis being a high-end option as the initial starter there. Either way, I actually think this improves the probability of the Giants going quarterback at some point.
I totally agree. I still think the question remains, is it with the third pick? Or
Mm-hmm.
is it, it almost feels weird to say, does Jameis buy them a little bit of like wiggle room to wait and take somebody a little bit later? Or I don't know. It probably does signal number 3, right?
For the Giants, it signals number 3 because it loosens the hold of the pressure a little bit, because what's going to happen with Jameis. He's going to be immensely productive, and that's going to come with interceptions. I think he was something like 13 and 12 this year. Obviously, he has the
Yeah.
30-30 year. The ball will be moved down the field. It's just a matter of, is the accuracy going to be there all the time? And it hasn't in recent years. That being said, if I'm the Tennessee Titans and I am looking at the Giants and I'm like, I really think they want a quarterback, I'm calling them every day until the draft and making them say no over and over again to trading up, because I feel like that's just the best value for them at 1.
Here's the thing though. So if we're even willing to have the conversation of the Titans moving out of 1,
Mm-hmm.
a team that clearly also needs a quarterback, but has a body that they could start if they
Right.
decided to go with a different position and then go in a different direction in the draft. Why wouldn't the same be true for the Giants with Jameis now? Like, is there a real advantage of Will Levis versus Jameis? They feel kind of same. Like, to a degree, you could start Jameis this year and have that be a bridge. Now, maybe as I'm talking through this and hearing myself out loud, I'm realizing the Giants are going to lose their jobs this year if they don't win more games. So maybe that specific team can't afford to go into the season and just say like, we'll just hit pause on that whole quarterback thing for a year, and Jameis will be fine to bridge.
Yeah, the outline of the game theory of this is as follows. The Titans have a front office that has the leash. Now, how far a leash do they have? I don't know, because they've been through several coaches and general managers with the new ownership down there in Nashville, but they certainly have as much power as they will ever have unless it completely goes right. So I think that's option number 1, is the differing timelines between the Browns and the Giants in particular, even though the Browns probably also have a little bit more leeway, and the Titans. And I think that builds synergy for a trade. The second item is Will Levis has greater potential. The tail is a lot longer on Jameis, who we have a decade of information on
That's true.
versus Levis, who we have 2 years. And second, they have the 5th-year option, or I guess he's technically a second-round pick, right? So they actually don't have the 5th-year option, but they have the idea that they can extend him at a young age, a la a Josh Allen or a Jordan Love per se. The question is, can he be that type of guy? Which it seems like the answer is no now. So I think between the favorable contract and youth situation for Will Levis and the timelines between the 3 teams picking 1, 2, and 3, there's a lot of synergy for trade there, or at least a lot of pressure for someone like the Giants to go ahead and move up for probably a discounted price as compared to something like the Bryce Young trade.
Is there one chair in the game of musical chairs left for Aaron Rodgers, and is it the Steelers, with whom he met? So, taking trips now, it's getting more serious potentially. Do you feel like it's Pittsburgh or bust for him?
It certainly feels like it, and we've deeply analyzed him, Lindsay. And the one thing he actually was good at was getting the ball up to talented receivers last year. And if I'm the Steelers and I'm looking, I have George Pickens and DK Metcalf, 2 guys that I think are talented receivers. If I'm the Steelers, the AI kind of tells a different story. The Sumer scores kind of tell a different story. But if that's what you want to lean on, it seems like there's a fit. I don't know why you wouldn't just, lock it in with Russell Wilson or try to
I agree.
figure something else out,
Yeah.
honestly. But that appears to be the landing spot right now.
Yeah. Oh, can you imagine the pressure packed situation that would be Aaron Rodgers in the Steelers with Mike Tomlin flirting with that whole tradition of him making the postseason? And then if this is the year that you're going to go into the season with this quarterback that looks a little bit borderline-ish in terms of his ability to get you there, and the ways in which this could massively implode if it goes the way that it did in New York. Like it could. I'm not trying to project a disaster, but I'm just saying like there's a lot of pressure in that particular situation for a lot of people.
I think that Tomlin just has such a outlined way to succeed that maybe the quarterback doesn't matter in getting to the 8 wins per se. They could have a Justin Fields as they had last year, or a Russell Wilson, or an Aaron Rodgers, or perhaps a rookie that they figure it out with. And they lean on the defense and they suck the air out of the ball, and then they're going to throw it deep off of play action a lot. And I think that's just the formula for them. And I think when we're talking about job security, Mike Tomlin would be hired before they even fire him at any given point in time, whether that's at the college ranks, the NFL ranks, the Fox Sports ranks. He would be hired somewhere immediately. And typically, if you have an asset like that, it's like it's like a girlfriend, Lindsay. If or a significant other, if you don't want him dating nobody else, you shouldn't let him go. So it's kind of the same thing.
I'm not sure if that's a healthy way to look at a relationship, but that aside, there was another signing that I know that we both think is kind of interesting, and Tyler Conklin to the Chargers. We'll get into that in just a little bit. First, though, our main guest today, Duke Manyweather, is one of the preeminent offensive line coaches in the country when it comes to scouting and development of offensive linemen. He is the guy that you want to talk to. He founded O-Line Masterminds, which, among other things, hosts a summit for offensive linemen of all ages. Year 8 coming up this summer. 325 players attended last year. I'm dying to attend myself, Sam. So just to observe, be a fly on the wall, learn a little bit. Anyway, he works with so many top offensive linemen, including quite a few of this year's draft prospects. I know Sam and I are both eager to hear about them. But first, I think we have some broader questions that we want to tap into his expertise for. Duke Manyweather, I have been wanting to talk to you for years. So thank you so much for making time. I know it's a busy time of year for you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It is that grind time, so to speak. It's really interesting because we get right into the thick of it with finishing up the pre-draft process. Just came off, 10 weeks of combine training. Now guys are into their pro days, and then we get the pros injected back into the program. So just it's a lot to balance. So it's definitely a fun time of year, busy time of year, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. I want to start kind of broadly with you
Okay.
as sort of the preeminent O line expert that I would say. I read an article today about quarterback development. and Jordan Palmer was talking about wanting to bring more objectivity to it and cited some of the specific ways that he wants to do that. If you could, in your role, change the way that people evaluate O-line prospects, what would that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with offensive line, just as a whole, we have seen a combination of. We went through a period where there was a lot of gimmick offenses, and everybody wanted to go fast, and so what that took away was from the fundamentals of offensive line. The stance, the steps, hat placement, eyes, feet. It's so important. The fundamentals will always be the fundamentals. So what I've seen over the years is the teams that have been good at every single level have dominant offensive lines. You saw that with the Eagles this year. And there's a common denominator with these offensive lines, and it's the fundamentals. So for me, I think that it needs to go back to the evaluation process, looking at the tape, understanding what a guy can do and cannot do, but really focusing on what they can do, and then building out tools and really skill sets around what I like to say their superpowers. So that's really the biggest thing for me. I think that as a whole, offensive linemen have been essentially evaluated wrong. I think their approach for development as a whole has kind of taken a step back. I think there's a lot of good coaches out there in the NFL and in college football doing it right. But I think that, it's one of the most thankless positions, and it's been treated like that for a very long time, where if you were just a big kid, hey, go out there and block somebody. And that's what people really think it is, but it's really the most skilled position on the field. You can make the argument with quarterback, but when you take a look at, and I always give this analogy, somewhere in the US and maybe even in a different country, there's somebody playing catch as a kid in their front yard with their dad or their uncle or their brother right now as we are recording this. But how many kids are lining up in a 3-point stance and a 2-point stance, taking a pass set and trying to stop somebody from getting to the quarterback or trying to drive somebody off the ball? It's just not many, because it's very much a learned skill. So when we look at that, there's so much to learn, and offensive line is one of those positions where just when you think you know everything, you learn more. So I really just think the overall mindset and the approach to development needs to change, and it really needs to start with the tape and then understanding what a guy can do and how that can be built out into a skill set that allows him to do a lot more.
Well, I love that you're talking about that skill set, and in particular, the techniques and the way it's developed, and the fact that you have the pros coming back into the program and learning more. And as a data scientist, it's really hard to project college to pro for all the reasons that you just stated. Some of the schemes are different. There's more gimmicks. In your view, having years of experience on this, what is the true difference between the college offensive line play and the pro offensive line play, given that that's what players cite all the time as the biggest gap jumping up?
Well, I think just the general eye test, it is the guys that you could say are more consistent. But I think the deeper answer to that is, one of the things that I see as a non-negotiable going from the college game to the pro game is the play strength. You have to have play strength. You have to be able to get yourself out of awkward angles. You have to be able to be strong, stable, and strong in some unique leverages in order to survive on Sundays. So I think that's number one. I think that when you see a guy that struggles with play strength in college, oftentimes they have those same struggles in the pros and they end up fizzling out. The second thing that I think is really a non-negotiable thing, and I really saw this with a lot of the great players that I've studied, and then a lot of the tremendous players that I train, is the ability to recover. So what I always say, it's not a crime to get beat, but it's a crime to stay beat. So you want to always try to be in position to regain leverage or to regain foot positioning from an aspect where you're not staying beat. It's not final. Your failure shouldn't be final on the offensive line. That's where the strain comes in. So I really think those two things, the non-negotiables, is a play strength, and then the ability to recover. What we like to say, be where your feet are. The third aspect that I think is really, really important, and it may be the first, is the mental makeup. I think the mental makeup becomes a non-negotiable aspect. The mindset of the position. It's a straining position. It's a difficult position. It's a position of really combat. to be honest with you. And then furthermore, when we actually talk about the mental processing that comes with the position, being able to understand that pre-snap information, I've got a 3 technique that has changed his stance if I'm a guard, and he's tighter alignment, he's probably going to move across my face. I need to know that based upon the alignment. I need to know that based upon what I've seen on tape. If I'm attack on the edge and this defensive end has normally lined up really wide on me at a tilt stance, and all of a sudden he's got his inside foot up, he's probably going to try to set me up for a speed rush to the outside, or I can know that I could be a little more aggressive in my set, but on his second step, he may beat me to the inside. So I need to be able to recover. So the pre-snap information, being able to process, being able to understand when defenses are changing safety rotations and all that type of stuff, and how that relates to pressure looks. I think those are really the things that are non-negotiable as well. And the reason why it becomes non-negotiable is because I truly believe that preparation plus processing translates into play speed. So guys being able to play fast. If you're not able to play with confidence because you don't understand what's going on from the preparation standpoint and from the processing standpoint, you're going to be hesitant. So I think preparation and processing really equals the dominant play speed. So those are really some of the non-negotiables I see translating from college to pro, and to have a chance to be a really good and adequate offensive lineman.
You talking about kids growing up, playing catch with their dads in the front yard, but not doing some of the things that offensive linemen do later on. Is this a skill set that starts clicking for people a little bit later in their development? Like, you could have a guy going into high school who's worked with like private coaches that's a quarterback for a ton of years, right? Like that might already be pretty far along in their development. Do you find offensive linemen clicking a little bit later on in their career?
I think so. Some guys have it and they have it early. But offensive line, as I said, is a learned skill.
Right.
Really what it boils down to, aside from the physical, when we talk about open skill versus closed skill in terms of skill acquisition, um, it's movement. So offensive line is the certain movement patterns and being strong in those angles. And sometimes it does take physical maturity, which takes time, for those things to develop. One of the things that I always try to really relate to people when it comes to development is that development is never linear and it's never instantaneous. And we do this thing specifically in the NFL where we dismiss guys after 1 or 2 years of
Yeah.
not being able to play. Where it's really weird because if you look at the development plan for like high school players, it's a 4 year cycle. When you look at college, for the most part, it's a 3 to 4 year cycle. When you even look at the Olympic cycle, it's a 4 year cycle. But in the NFL, we try to give up on players after 1 or 2 years. And I think that a guy like Dan Moore, who just got paid by Tennessee from the Pittsburgh Steelers, is a great example of a 4 year development plan and it really paying off. I think when you look at a guy like Trey Smith, you kind of saw that raw ability out of Trey in Tennessee, and he's just been very diligent about the way he's gone about his business from a physical and mental standpoint. And 4 years later, you've got a really good player that is going to be the highest paid guard in football. So I think that, and from that aspect, sometimes it does click a little later. And even if it doesn't click a little later, what it boils down to is because of the physical nature of the position and because of how non-natural it is, it takes multiple reps over time and multiple strain over times in live action for it to start to click. And you only get those exposures in highly competitive practices and highly competitive games. So where quarterbacks can get reps that will be a great
Yeah.
look in 7-on-7, and throwing and the timing with the
Mhm.
throwing and the timing with the 7-on-7. Offensive linemen are getting those. Really, when you really get your pin your ears back and a flow of the game is in the game, not scrimmages, not 9-on-7, not 1-on-1 pass rush. And 1-on-1 pass rush, the defenders know that it's a pass. They're pinning their ears back. In 9-on-7, they know it's a run. So when it comes to the rhythm and the continuity of offensive line play, the only way to really get those live reps are in games. And so when we talk about time under tension, it's going to take time
Yeah.
to really achieve the rhythm and the actual moxie of the position.
Yeah, and just talking about that rhythm, we've been talking about the individual level, But that's even amplified to the team level. You're talking about
Yep.
Trey Smith. He was next to Creed Humphrey and Joe Tooney, and they had to have excellent chemistry.
Yep.
Mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles. There's been guys across that line that have been there for years, and they built that chemistry. In terms of the mental processing of the play speed, the processing, the preparation, how much does a team fit, particularly now that we're in draft season, matter to some of these guys?
It matters a lot, and so that's why like this pre-draft process is important. Um, when you look at the combine, everybody loves to watch the testing stuff, which I mean, who doesn't? And I must say that us being the premier offensive line development program in the nation, we blew the combine out the water. I mean, we had the four of the five fastest 40s, we had four of the five highest verts, we had the top five broad jumps, we had the top short shuttle, the top three cone, and we ranked in the top five of the bench press. So we dominated, but none of that was really important. What was important is the medical, the interviews, and then the makeup profiles with the mental stuff. So those are the important things that really come from it. So teams are really trying to find their fit, finding guys that really fit into what they do, and really trying to make sure that they've got these guys completely dialed in from a profile standpoint, and they're really understanding where they came from and then what their trajectory for development truly is.
I want to back up to the Senior Bowl. You're talking about combine there. Senior Bowl, the line one-on-ones are everybody's favorite thing to watch, right? It's probably the only time for in which that's true at a practice, and everybody's focused on the line one-on-ones. What are you looking for in that type of environment?
Well, if we're talking about just guys that I'm working with, I'm looking for them to be confident in the techniques that we worked on.
Okay.
And what I always tell guys is, listen, practice is the time to practice and go out and really hone in on new things. Don't be afraid to get beat. There's a lot of anxiety around the Senior Bowl. There's a lot of anxiety around, those All-Star games, and rightfully so, because one false move, you're going viral. As we
Right.
saw with Josh Connerly. But at the end of the day, I had quite a few guys out there and really stuck to the script, and we said, hey, with this particular guy, we want to make sure we stand square in our pass set, and we're going to make sure we do that and expand late. Saw a guy do that, Jalen Travis. With another particular guy in Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech, I said, hey, I want to make sure that we're jump setting, aggressive setting a lot. If you get beat, you get beat, but let's continue to add that into your skill set, because it's not something that he did at Texas Tech, but it's something that he's probably going to have to rely on in the NFL as an interior player. So what I'm looking for really is guys sticking to the script, but as a whole, even guys I'm not working with, what I'm looking for is, again, the recovery aspect of pass protection. If they get beat, do they stay beat? And then I'm also looking at how they respond when they do lose a rep. Do they go into the tank, or are they going to come back out and compete, strain, and want to fight? So as we look at the process as a whole, I want to see guys how they respond and how they continue to get better throughout the week if I'm not working with them, just on a strictly evaluation process. And then from there, with the guys I am working with, I want to see them be able to execute the things that we've been working on.
It's interesting talking about the Senior Bowl and hearing you discuss how you had some of your guys work on new things at the
Yep.
Senior Bowl, primarily because that's what they're going to be doing in the NFL.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot to our scouts and to Thomas Dimitroff and a bunch of people as we've been at these events about this draft class. And it seems like a lot of these guys have swing potential, but maybe aren't exactly projected in the consensus, of course, to any one single position, as compared to last year, where a guy like Joe Alt, for example, was a certified tackle. He had that tackle build, but it seems like there's an array of strengths in this class, but there's not necessarily a projection to any given position per se. So how much projection do you think is required for this class, and how many new techniques have you been having to teach?
Well, let's start with the new techniques. And part of the reason why I had a lot of those guys try new things is because they were making position changes.
Mm.
So I think that's one. The other thing is this is I think sometimes, and I'm not a person that ducks anything, so I don't mind pissing off teams. I don't mind pissing off agents. I don't give a flying, you know what. Um, And I tell teams all the time when they're wrong, and they get mad at me, but then they'll come back and they go, you know what, you're actually right. And why I'm saying that is this. I think sometimes a couple of things happen when it comes to O-line, which goes back to our opening thing. They're evaluated wrong, and therefore the plan for development is wrong. I think sometimes teams, front offices, overthink offensive line. They overthink it. They don't understand, I don't think, all the time of what actually translates into Sundays from the college game. And so, for instance, let's take a guy like Will Campbell. Will Campbell tape is very good, but people are very worried about his arm length.
Yep.
But I'm not worried about his arm length because I see how effective he is with using his hands. So what I always say is efficient feet allow for effective hands, and with a guy like Will, his feet are great. He's got the ability to recover, and then he's very violent with his hand and has superior hand usage. So he's not a guy that's going to play with a whole lot of length. Length isn't a necessity. It's one of those things that ends up being an asset if you have it, you know.
Yep.
But I've also seen guys with extremely long arms that couldn't block a troll on Twitter. You know, they don't know how to use their hands, and they constantly let guys get into their body. So it's like, what's the point of having 35-inch hands if you're going to drop them and allow guys speed to power you and push you into the quarterback? So I tell teams that all the time, and they have no answer for me. So in terms of transferable traits and translatable traits, I think it really is a player-to-player thing. You know, again, it goes back to one of my key catalysts is what does this player do really well? All right. What is his superpower? What makes him special? All right, let's build from that. That is my ground principle when it comes to offensive line development is what makes him special. Let's build his skill set around that. And let's give him not only the physical coaching, but also the mental side of it to say, hey, let's do this way, and this is why. So getting him to understand the what, the why, and the how of every technique he's going to use. I think that's really important. I think that if teams took that approach to evaluation and then also development, things would be a lot cleaner. I know, and this isn't the case with all teams, but there's some teams out there where the front office and the actual O-line coach are on different pages, you know? There's some, for instance, I had Zach Martin, who I worked with for years, is going to be a future Hall of Famer, just retired. I think in 10 or 11 years, Zach had 7 or 8 O-line coaches, you know? So when you look at that, and he's not the only person to experience that. And so I always tell players that, like, yes, there's a level of coachability you need to have. I said, but also you need to win reps. You know, it's like some of these coaches get so caught up on doing things my way. This is how you tell you. It's like, listen, buddy, you're going to be fucking gone next year, and another coach is going to want to do it his way too. So like I tell guys all the time, like you got to find a way to win and find a way to be able to replicate that success down in and down out. So I think that's really important as well.
How willing are teams to work with you about the people that you train in the off season that are on their team to make sure you're on the same message?
As I always tell, I mean, I consult for quite a few teams, but pretty much I hear, and here's the thing, the teams that are really good with offensive line development are really good with drafting and even free agency. We have open communication. We talk all the time. The teams that struggle are the teams that are oftentimes the most arrogant about not wanting to collaborate and things like that. So it goes hand in hand. And it's too bad for them. But I would say for the most part, and especially teams like the Saints and teams like the Steelers and Kansas City and Philly and Tennessee, I mean, track records of great offensive line coaches and great offensive line development. I talk to them all the time. And it's very much a symbiotic and what we like to say a mastermind of really collaboration. And that's how it should be.
I want to follow really quickly on a couple things that you brought up there, and I just want to make it this clear. Will Campbell is, in your mind, a tackle?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mimbu.
Tackle.
Tackle?
Tackle.
Okay. And then Tyler Booker, guard. What
Yep.
is his special power?
Tyler Booker's special power is just his play strength. I think his play strength, his mental makeup is that of an all-time great. I
Mhm.
think that, his natural leadership qualities, he's long, he's powerful, he's able to move guys off the ball, he's able to anchor and pass pro, and just a really great, phenomenal human being. So I think that Tyler Booker, I think those three guys you just named could have potential to be 1, 2, and 3 in terms of offensive linemen taken in the draft.
Last
They just so
question. Who?
happen to
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say they just so happen to have all trained together. Yeah.
Uh, who's a guy in this class that you're not hearing discussed enough?
Thomas Perry from Middlebury. Thomas Perry from Middlebury is a Division III kid that we call him Thomas the Tank, and I think that people need to talk more about him. 6'3", 315. Is going to test really well. Uh, really, when you look at his trajectory for development, he's really a sophomore in football. At the D3 level where he played at, they only play 9 games a year. They only get 20 practices going into fall camp. So he's got like 30 starts, and so that's really the level of like a sophomore in college. So I think Thomas Perry is a guy that people need to start talking about more.
Yeah, the
Last
excellent
question.
showing at the Shrine Bowl. It
He
was fun
did.
to
He did.
watch.
He did have a great showing.
Last question. I know you're super busy. I'm sorry. We just went through free agency. Are there any teams in particular that made an impression on you with their O-line moves?
Minnesota. I think Minnesota did some nice things in free agency to bolster that offensive line with Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. I know those are some losses that Indianapolis probably didn't want to part ways with, but I thought they did a really good job on the O-line.
Duke Manyweather, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate the insights. Could have talked to you for like an hour longer. I have so many questions left in the holster. So I'm going to have to come down to O-line Masterminds to the summit and ask you in
Yes,
person.
absolutely. Come on down, and I'll send you some information. We got something pretty cool planned this year for the summit for year 8 that I think that is going to be a game changer.
And you can follow Duke on the Twitter at Big Duke 50. You can also follow along for more information about the O-line Mastermind Summit at OL Masterminds. Sam, that was fun to talk to him. Like, kind of thought that he was going to come in strong on Will and Mimbo. I'm so disappointed in myself, by the way, though, that I called him Mimbo, because I know it's Mimbu, and then whatever. I guess I need to say that out loud like a lot more before the draft.
The mentality is so different when you talk to these O-line guys. And it's that way when you're on a team, right? It's like you pull up and there's 6 F-150s all painted the same color, and everybody has the same Yeti glass or whatever. Like there's a full different fraternity. I don't even know what the best way to call it is. And it's clear that not only does Duke understand that, but he's also a culture setter. And that
Yeah.
allows him to get to these guys and to develop them the right way, which is a thing that we don't talk about a lot in football, Lindsay, because it's NFL. It's not for long. And you get your year or two, and if you don't do it, then congratulations. Like, hey, go work at Enterprise Rent-A-Car or something like that. I don't know. And it's clear that Duke doesn't approach it that way. And that was what I was most excited about picking his brain about, and the insights that he gave us of what he's really looking for don't really marry up with what the normal person would be looking for.
Yeah, but I think that that's probably true for most people who do coaching and in the weeds type.
Right.
Like when they really understand the process, it just doesn't match with timeline in the NFL. My guess is that a lot of people in the NFL understand that, and
Right.
they just don't have time
Just a
for it.
reality. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that we've talked about with regards to quarterback development. And then when you throw out conceptually, like, and then we'll just take a quarterback in the 3rd round and develop him. I'm like, when? When is
Yeah.
that guy getting developed? Because you brought in a bridge and that veteran is set to start because you drafted this guy in the 3rd round. So he's not your priority. You don't think he's ready yet. Like, when are you getting him reps to develop him, quote unquote? Even Anthony Richardson is having a hard time developing on the fly, and they are all in on him. That's somebody who they took early enough that he's given every shot. It's tough, man, to have a long leash, which is I don't know. It's such an and I feel like O-line is one of those positions too that we've talked about this with regards to like the Raiders, for instance, and their offensive line. And is it Is it that they need to upgrade the positions, or do those guys just need a little bit more time together for that chemistry to pay off, for them to develop a little bit further, and then they'll be fine? Like, that's part of the evaluation process with these O-lines too.
What was so fascinating to me and what kept popping up in my head as he was talking was Mekhi Becton, who's one of his guys. He was celebrating Mekhi going to the Chargers after an excellent year at guard in Philly. And the things that he was highlighting and the marriage between him and coaching, the consulting that he does, him mentioning in particular the Philadelphia Eagles made so much sense, because here's a guy who had all the physical tools, and clearly Duke and once he got to the Eagles, Jeff Stoutland were preparing this dude for success, but it wasn't the same success that maybe the Jets saw in him prior to. And we saw him basically become a mountain in that crazy offensive line and then cash in and go to another offensive line based system under Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers. And it just makes me wonder what some of these guys would have if they had a time like that, given they can figure it out and then all of a sudden become borderline Pro Bowl players.
Have I told you my Mekhi Becton Chargers facility story?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
Breaking news, Lindsay over here.
Yeah. So here, fun pull back the curtain anecdote. So I live in the town, like the Chargers facilities in El Segundo. It's the next town over from where I live. So my son plays flag football for the Snoop and Hoosh League, which is the Chargers are the team that like supports it, promotes it, whatever.
Right.
And so on the day that Mekhi Becton signed with the Chargers, but he had not yet, it was a day that they invited all the championship teams to come to the facility for a tour. And so I was with my son with like 200 other kids or whatever, and their parents in the lobby of the Chargers facility on that day of free agency. And Mekhi Becton walked through the lobby with someone else as we were all standing in the lobby. And my brain starts going, who is that? And I knew it was someone. And clearly, we're still early-ish in the wave of free agency. And I knew it was a free agent or potentially a player that was already on roster that was just there working out or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But my brain could not place the face. And of course, he's not like wearing a uniform. So I don't know. And then later that night, they posted to social media, Mekhi Becton, welcome. We signed him. And I went, damn it. That was who that was. I was so mad that I couldn't place the face. But I knew it was somebody big.
Could have broken the news,
No.
but
I probably wouldn't have anyway, because it would have felt like a little bit against the invitation, the spirit of it. Like they didn't know that they were welcoming someone who was gonna, like go full like reporter,
a secret undercover agent. Yeah.
Totally.
Per Little League Baseball sources, Mekhi Becton will be signing with the Chargers.
Right. I know. The Chargers coincidentally also signed a tight end recently, since we have last talked, Tyler Conklin. And I think that this is an interesting signing in that I don't know if it says that they're not going to draft a tight end. Because normally I would say probably it doesn't take that off the table. I don't think Tyler Conklin is enough of a high-end signing that you would go, oh, yeah, we're just not even going to go there with this great group of tight ends. But they already have Will Dissly on the roster. And so if they were losing that guy, that veteran presence that they could turn to in event, as a backup plan, the fact that they already have him, and he's perfectly capable of playing the position as we saw last year. I mean, people who play fantasy know that the dismissal was someone you fired up at the end of the season. I don't know what to make of the Tyler Conklin signing. I wonder if that does mean that they're going in a different direction.
So the plan is always clear, I think, for Harbaugh, which is he wants to build a power team, and Mekhi Becton is certainly a part of that. Now they have three massive guys in Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt, and Mekhi Becton.
So
plus,
good.
Yeah, and so now I think they can approach the draft in a different way.
Yeah.
Tight ends always have long development curves, typically. Like Brock Bowers.
No, you've said that before. Not Bowers, not Laporta. Not in the last few years, they haven't.
But okay, but you're naming like two guys. What about David Njoku? What about, even to a certain degree, Travis Kelce? Like you really have to look at the high end to understand. At the lower end, like TJ Hawkinson's another example, had to be traded before he became a good guy. Like historically, we see that the tight end aging curve is like 2 to 3 years. It may be changing. You do bring up a good point, Lindsay, of why we should relook at this if they're going to be used in the kind of increasing personnel diversity rather than a guy who is going to be asked to be George Kittle, which is like the true secret weapon of a team, but also is immensely hard to do.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, a guy like Colson Loveland probably should be on the board. I currently have him going to the Chargers just after analyzing the way the draft could fall. And he is more of a potential guy for run blocking and a production guy for receiving. So it does make sense to have a stable of tight ends, particularly if I'm Jim Harbaugh and I love tight ends, to be alongside a player like that. That being noted, there's just not a lot of high-end wide receiver talent outside of Tedoroa and McMillan. So it seems like Chargers fans may be in a spot where they were last year, where they go in the second or third round and try to draft a wide receiver, a tight end, or a pass catcher for Justin Herbert and hope it works out. Certainly did with Ladd McConkey, but it'll be interesting to see how they play the value of those picks.
Is that a wait and rather than draft the tight end, get like a slot guy?
I mean, I think that it would probably go to the defensive side of the ball. Poona Ford no longer there. They've had some reshuffling.
Yeah, I'm not saying not in the first round. I'm saying then wait and then get that maybe like a slot guy wide receiver not in the first round.
It's just tough because it's tough to figure out what they want to do other than run the ball. So if I'm weighting positional value for them, not necessarily for the positions, but sure enough, tight end immensely deep, running back immensely deep, roll of the dice. Who do they think the best one is, other than maybe like Ashton Genty, who seems to be a clear number one? Tight end position seems to be Loveland and Warren, but that's probably a smaller gap between those two and a guy like, Arroyo from Miami or Rondé Gadsden from Syracuse or some of the guys that are even day 3 projected. And so it feels as if you can wait, try to take a premium talent like a Kenneth Grant, perhaps, who Harbaugh had at Michigan in the first round, and then try to take a shot on one of those deeper tight end running back positions later on in the draft. Of course, they also signed Najee Harris as well. So it's like where they need players is where the draft is deep, except for the wide receiver position, which they addressed in quotes with Ladd McConkey last year, but that wasn't a premium pick that they used on it.
And they still have other wide receiver needs, even though Mike Williams is back. But with the regard to Najee Harris, I feel like they still need a pass catching back. Right? That's not really a way that he was utilized all that frequently in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so it makes me feel like, because that's another one that you could look at and go, well, maybe they don't draft that because they signed Najee, right? So they spent on that position. I don't know that signals that.
Sorry, I was about to sneeze. Let me.
Good job muting.
Let me mark that. Yeah, it's tough because the analytical case on Najee Harris is not necessarily, I think, the case of why they signed him, because he has not analytically been that great of a running back. He's been a starter level guy, but not, Derrick Henry out here.
He doesn't get hurt. So he's the anti-J.K. Dobbins in that sense.
Exactly. And so he's just going to eat snaps. And I think there is a certain portion, and I from a hypothetical sense, I am a part of this camp where it's like you get the guys who can play every single snap, and then you worry about how good they are after that. Because if I don't want to rip you out of the game, or you are not durable and can't stay on the field, it doesn't matter to me how great you are or what potential you can show, because I can't put you out there on the field. Najee Harris is a guy who can take 15 to 20 carries a game and not get injured. He's one of the few running backs, including guys like Saquon Barkley, who have done that over the past 4 years. And so it lends itself more to take a high potential guy or, a gadget type guy at the running back position, of which, there's 30 it seems like to choose from in this draft.
You know what we just did where Najee's concerned? We just guaranteed something happening next year that hasn't happened before.
Yeah, and
we just talked about him.
That's the bet they're making, certainly. It's like, it's the reason why the running back position is not paid at the level that other positions are.
No, I'm saying we jinxed him. I'm saying jinxed him. I'm saying we just talked about with way too much authority about his lack of injuries.
I think that's why he received the compensation that he did, though, is that is their expectation of him. Now,
Totally agree. Yeah.
analytically, is that a good expectation? History tells us not really. I mean, Todd Gurley wasn't missing a lot of games, and then all of a sudden the wheels came off during a borderline, offense player of the year season years ago with the Rams. So
You
it's
can't measure
tough to
jinxes
gauge.
in analytics. These
No,
are,
yeah.
you know.
And I'm a big believer. I'm from South Louisiana. I'm about to go back to New Orleans on Wednesday, and now I'm jinxing people out here, all bad moo juju and all kinds of bad. The gree is on me, Lindsay. I gotta keep it away.
Funny. Sam Bruchhaus, once again, always a pleasure. You can find us together with Thomas Dimitrov on Friday for our SiriusXM NFL show about the draft. The SumerSports Draft Show will be on channel 88, 7 Eastern. Again, is the time. We hope that you'll join us for that. Thank you so much for being here with us. Check out SumerSports.com for all the advanced stats that are free, not behind a paywall, and the Draft FM podcast. Who is on that with you this week?
Fran Duffy was on this week, and we had a really excellent conversation, Lindsay. And it's been so fun to hear all these different perspectives as we've been on the road and talking to Thomas on Fridays. Fran approaches the draft with a horizontal draft board, and the left side is like APYs. And so it really brings a different view because, he has Cam Ward at the top of his big board, but he's not in the $40 million range that, even a Baker Mayfield or someone like Jared Goff is in that $40 million range. So it really forces you to make decisions on what you think these players can be. And he talked through it excellently. And especially with the offensive line, which we talked about so diligently here, and the power of the swing offensive linemen in those two markets, tackle and guard, kind of converging this year with Trey Smith getting paid so much. He had a lot of cool insights on how he's approaching that with some of these offensive linemen.
Very cool. Be checking that out, and can't wait to meet up with you again next week.
Gonna be fun.